This podcast is brought to you by CDKeyoffers.com. Use offer code BrokenSilicon for 25% off Windows codes and Die Shrink for 3% off everything on the website. All right, let's get to the show. Welcome to Broken Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. I am your host, Tom, and today, well, as I do every day, I will let my guest introduce himself.
Hey everyone, my name is Paxton Galvanek, and I am the HR and Operations Director at Funcom, video game developer, been around for about 28 years or so now. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah, and I met you at the Carolina Game Summit, which I was, I guess, according to them, a celebrity YouTuber coming in for the show. And really my goal was to just meet as many people who actually work on games, program for games, write for games, and manage studios like you do. I mean, why don't you, it was funny, I was talking to someone who was in charge of rigging at Funcom, which if I remember correctly, I hope I do, someone makes a model for a character. So she was in charge of actually like putting the bones in that model and so that it all lines up correctly, which didn't even occur to me you need to do, but of course you do.
Yep, that's her job. Her strictly a rigger. That's what she does, and she makes sure that things look normal when they move, and she puts the structure to our animation. So yeah. But
it's funny. You said you were kind of in charge of more managing the studio, and you almost seemed like you weren't sure if I'd be interested in that. And
You never know what people want to hear and what they don't want to hear. I don't know. So
well, it's funny though, because it's like I don't know that I've ever heard a conversation on a podcast with someone who actually manages a studio and can like talk about what that entails.
Yeah, normally people talk to like a developer, like the lead developer or creative director that talks about a game, or you'll talk to possibly somebody that is in the trenches, like a producer of some sort. So my job is to just keep the studio running, and I work globally, so I do everything with the studio that has to do with operations and human resources. I build the teams. I deal with admin, like I do facilities. I do everything. I make sure everybody's happy. I do our culture. I make sure we have an awesome culture at Funcom. So I kind of handle all of that. So it's just different. Yeah, you're right. People don't normally interview somebody that is kind of like a general manager of a studio. So yeah.
Well, there's been a lot of, which is very curious because you see all of this, and I put it in quotes, reporting on like what's going on at like Rockstar or Activision, Blizzard, all of these studios. And it seems like all you ever get is anonymous sources of one guy who is programming and what his opinion is. It's like, has anyone ever bothered to actually talk about what it even takes to run a studio in general before you approach what a culture is at a studio?
People don't normally talk to us. We just do our hardest to keep things running, to build great teams, to keep the lights on. I mean, that's our job. And people don't normally approach us and ask us those type of things. Our job is just to keep it going, keep growing, and keep making things happen and make the best environment that we possibly can for our employees. So that's what I do every day.
So let me back up then. I assume you play video games, right?
Oh yeah.
So I'm kind of curious. What was some of your earliest memories of getting into gaming? Did you like have a PS2? Were you on a?
Oh man, I'm older than that. I'm way older than that. Yeah. I'm in my 40s. So I grew up with an Atari in my house, and I played games like Activision's Pitfall, and I played those type of games when I was a small kid. And I remember in 1987 getting the first Nintendo, and that changed everything for me. I played The Legend of Zelda, and I thought to myself, I can't believe I could go on these quests in a video game and get different weapons and grow my character. It was like the first RPG kind of game I've ever seen, and I loved it. Then after that, I was hooked. I played PC games. I played games like King's Quest and Space Quest, and I played Ultima Online. I mean, I was playing older games, and I mean, I loved video games. I did PC, I did console. I bought a PlayStation 1 to get Final Fantasy 7. That's why I bought that system. So I grew up through the 80s, 90s, 2000s, even now. In gaming, I buy all the consoles I can, try all the games out I can. I love video games. It shaped my life. So, yeah, that's. I would say Legend of Zelda is one of the biggest contributing factors to me opening my eyes to video games and what it can do and what it can't do. So
yeah, and I guess that's probably right from the perspective of, I mean, before that, comparing something like Zelda, where it's like, well, this is a world. This isn't like a ball moving across the screen.
Yeah. It was different. It was something I could explore. You're right. I was playing side scrollers or just simple games like Asteroids and Space Invaders and things that I was like, okay, it's a skill based game. But now I'm playing a game where I can go on these quests and go into this world, and it just changed my vision of gaming, and I loved it. So I got hooked ever since then. So I play games to this day. I have an Xbox Series X at home. I've got a PlayStation. I have a PC. So I play everything I possibly can.
Would you say you primarily game on PC at this point, or did you always mostly game on PC, or what?
For work, I have to game. We design most of our games for Steam, the Epic Store, those type of things. But we also do console, so that's why I have everything. But I play on the Xbox now because I have three brothers. We all like to play games together. We played Destiny 2. We tried Anthem. We play games together, and I like the fact that I could throw a headset on, play with my brothers, throw on, and play a little Overwatch if I wanted to, whatever it may be. And it's just fun to do with my brothers. So I do consoles for more of a sit down and just hang out with friends and family. When I sit down on my PC, I do our games for game development. That's when I play test games. So I do that. You wouldn't think, oh, a general manager play test games. Yeah, I play test all of our games. We have so many games in the works right now that I'm like, okay, what's going on with that roguelike game? What are we doing with the rhythm-based shooter? And I could talk about all these games later on if you want, but I use my PC to test the games that we're building.
Now, is this something that happened more over time as you got into game development, or you migrated more to kind of play on a console just because it's in a different room from where you work? I'm guessing you used to play on PC a lot more, right?
I did. I actually ran a clan of people doing World of Warcraft, and we had a game, America's Army, put out by the U.S. Army. I ran a guild of people on that, and we were pretty popular during doing first-person shooters. We played Battlefield, all these other games. That was all PC-based. So I did that from 2002 to 2010-ish. I was on my PC, but then I started to have kids, and it was like, okay, I want to just get away from everything. So I started to get more into console, where I'm like, I've got 4 kids now, so it's like, okay, they do their own thing. I want to just go to the bonus room and sit down in front of my Xbox and just veg out for a little bit. So I got back into consoles to just escape for a little bit. I'd say that.
Well, I guess this is probably a good generation to be doing that, right? Now that we're on the subject, I kind of want to ask you this early on too. What do you think of this console generation? Because from my perspective, it's more impressive than the last one. Now's a good time, right?
Oh yeah. The games coming out, the people that are playing the games. I mean, I like the console generation. I mean, our studio is kind of moving to a console first mentality. How does it feel when you put a controller in your hand? A lot of the games I'm playing that we're developing lately, I throw my Xbox controller right into my PC, and I sit there and I try it out with a controller. So we're designing more for that because the culture's it's great nowadays. I mean, I love being part of it. So yeah.
Now, let me ask you this, because you brought up the controller. I've always felt like pretty much every game, obviously maybe not an RTS needs to use a controller, and maybe, you would expect someone in a fighting game to use a controller, not a keyboard and mouse. But what do you think about keyboard and mouse on console? Because I know a lot of PC gamers would game more on console if they could use a keyboard and mouse. And it's interesting. Let me give you some. I've assumed up until about a month ago, that basically every console game had to have mouse and keyboard controls somewhere in an INI file that they turned off. Why don't they just let us have it on console? But I talked to a developer at Sony Santa Monica, and he's like, no, it actually doesn't. Even on our dev kits, even on PCs running a build of God of War, you have to plug in a PS5 controller, or you cannot move the character at all. And so I guess that's not necessarily true.
Not true. Yeah, it's not. You have to reprogram it. I have a team of people at Funcom. There are systems and console programmers that their job is to kind of take what we're doing and make sure that it works on the Xbox and the PlayStation, and even on the Switch. We're doing Switch games, and that's a whole different beast. That's like programming on phones. So when you have these like beautiful AAA quality games, and you're like, okay, we have to throw it on the Switch. It's like, okay, let's do what we can to make this thing work, but because the processing power just isn't there with a Switch, but regardless, I have a team of people that will take the code and make sure that it works properly on consoles, that it's optimized, that the actual buttons work. It's working properly.
So here's the thing, though. You'd be surprised. Some games actually do support keyboard and mouse on console. Like, what was it? Zombie Army 4. I just saw in the menu on a PS4. It said keyboard and mouse on, and I'm like, what? And I just plugged it in, and it just worked exactly like a PC. And I was like, all right, so it is. So I guess
it must be there for some of them.
Yeah, so I'm wondering then, like, if that's something you've thought about, just putting keyboard and mouse on all, probably not Switch, but all other consoles.
For Xbox and PlayStation, it's a valid option. I mean, sure, the more that we can grow our base of gamers that will play our game, the better. So if that's an option, I mean, we could definitely look into that and see if it's something that people are looking for. I mean, that's the whole thing with game development. You try to find out what people want and just gear your things toward them. And what can we do to make things better, to capture the biggest audience, to make things easiest? And that could be something that we look into. I'm not saying we do it now, but it could be something in the future.
You're not saying it's officially confirmed, but I always see that because, like, I would say my channel is most PC centric. I mostly game on PC, but I've never been afraid to talk about consoles. I've always just been like, it's just another gaming device. Why not talk about it every now and then? And right now, at least compared to, especially, I mean, with the shortages going on for graphics cards.
That's so frustrating for us. I can't even find them for my employees. It's horrible.
But I'd say a lot of people want to move to console, or at least temporarily with these rising prices. It's like, well, if this is, $400 or even like $350 Xbox Series S, they're like, man, if this could just have a keyboard and mouse, I would just use this for until prices come down.
Yep, absolutely.
But
yeah, that's a valid point.
Let's start it there. Like, when did you realize this was going to be? Because it's happened before. There's been shortages before, but like, when did you guys see it as a huge issue? Was it earlier this year?
It's with crypto. No, it's been a year and a half with cryptocurrencies and bit mining. I mean, we realized it a year and a half ago when the prices started going up, and we're like, why can't we get our normal NVIDIA cards? I mean, we're trying to get the 3070s, the 3080s, the 3090s, whatever. Like, we can't find them. And the better graphics cards that we have, the better games that we can make, and the faster our animators can animate things, and the faster our game designers can design things. So we need the best graphics cards in our machines, and we can't find them. So we're going through all avenues, reaching out to NVIDIA and whoever it may be, and trying to find where we can get these cards. I would say it's been a year and a half at least that we've been struggling trying to find a good quantity of video cards, GPUs.
And this is connected to a question my friend Brock had, which is just like, when does a studio, I want to make sure I think of even how to say this, like, not only like when do you guys decide to upgrade, but how do you decide what to upgrade to? Because I know like you'll see some studios and it's like, oh, they just have like I've seen like at CD Projekt, like they'll just have like 3 3090s in a rig, and it's like, that's what we're testing this on. And it's like, but it's like, is that what you're doing though? Because is that what most people have, Is that a good idea to test it on something that much more powerful than like a 120 teraflop system isn't what most people have?
Yeah, we have different systems all over our office to test things. No, we don't have a system with 3 3090s in it. So when we upgrade our things, honestly, we'll look at our team and be like, what are you currently running? And can we get something better than that? That's pretty much what we're at now, is like, what can we find? I mean, we're like any other person looking at retail. I mean, you'd think a video game studio would have some special ins. We try, but a lot of our distributors are like, we can't even find them. Like, they're hard to come by. And this even goes for consoles. At Funcom, we have an initiative where we want people to play consoles. We give every employee a next-gen system. So you could take home a PlayStation 5, an Xbox Series X, or a Switch if you wanted to.
This is a good ad for applying to work at your company right now.
Yeah, thanks. But it's all about that, like, work-life balance and culture fit, making sure one of our pillars is like be the gamer. That's what we want. We want people to love video games and be able to play on different systems. So we want to be able to have them take home a system that they could try out. If they work on a PC all day, it'd be nice if they can just go home and have an Xbox Series X or a PlayStation 5 at home that they could try things out. We can't even find enough PlayStation 5s to give to our employees. I think that I probably have 30 or 40 employees that are sitting there waiting on a system that I've announced 8 months ago. This is our initiative. We want to do this. I cannot find them. I have my ops and admin team every day going on to Twitter, seeing the restock, Twitter feeds and seeing.
You're doing the exact same thing the normal consumer is to try to get your employees.
And we're a game development studio. Like, we can't even find PlayStations and Xboxes. It's crazy to me. I've called up Best Buys and Targets, and I've reached out to Sony, and they're just like, we have our distributors, and that's where we send them, and you have to go through them. So you'd think we get some special perks having 260 employees that all want Xboxes or PlayStations, but we don't get that. So,
it's funny too, because I think a lot of people would assume you get special treatment. Like, they would hear you give all of your employees a PS5, and it's like, must be nice. And it's like, well, yeah, but also we're going through just as much effort as you
Absolutely.
guys. And I have to too. I'm not a giant YouTube channel, or at least I'm not one that gets sent free stuff. I think I get hate when I review a graphics card sometimes. Like, why are you rubbing it in? And it's like, I actually had to try pretty hard to get that card to review you guys. It's just your job to use it,
Absolutely.
But notice the PS5 isn't used for mining, and that's hard to get as well. I mean, I don't know if you saw this report came out about how many GPUs were shipped in the prior quarter. Like, shipments were up 40% year over year or something crazy. Like 20 million cards have been shipped. And there's...
It's like, where are they?
I mean, apparently people want to play video games right now,
It could be.
Anonymous writes in, just like people who support Moore's Laws on Patreon can do, and he asks, hey, Tom and Paxton, Dune game, is it going to be good? The David Lynch film was god-awful, which I didn't even realize David Lynch made that. Usually he makes pretty good stuff. But in theory, I'm all in for a high-concept sci-fi world with rich lore. Sell me on it.
Sell you on it. Okay. So Funcom has teamed up with Legendary Pictures. This is not a movie tie-in game. We have a relationship with Legendary Pictures where we have to produce 3 Dune games over the 6-year time span since we signed the contract. So we have to do 3 Dune games. They're putting a lot of money and effort and resources into this Dune franchise. It is going to be huge. I will tell you that the movie is absolutely amazing. I know people that have seen it. We were on site.
I was going to ask, you've seen it then?
I have not personally seen it. We were on site, though, in Europe while they were shooting it. Mm-hmm. Our team went out to Europe, so we were on site because our game has to feel like it's in the same universe as the movie. Like I said, it's not a movie tie-in, so we're not following Paul Atreides and his journey, learning about Arrakis, and so it's set within, let's say, the same century, but it's not that storyline. We are building an open world persistent survival game on Arrakis. That's what we're building. So you can drop onto the sand planet and you need to survive, and you can decide whether you want to be, an Atreides or a Fremen or whatever you want to be in the game. You survive, you harvest, you build, you grow. We're going to have vehicles and weapons and raiders. And I mean, we're taking kind of the best practices that we learned from Conan Exiles, our survival game, putting that into Dune and making it 1,000 times better. So you're going to be able to jump in an ornithopter and fly around this crazy looking ship, which is, if you could see this video behind me, there's a concept art piece behind me. But you're going to be able to fly around, and you're going to be able to see these worms, these huge sandworms come out of the ground, and spice blooms and all these things. It's all going to be in the game for you to decide whether you want to harvest, if you want to raid other players. It's going to have PvP, PvE. So it's just an open world persistent survival game set in that world for next gen systems. Yeah.
So the immediate question that comes to mind when you talk about it is, because I don't honestly know how this works. Like, how did you guys get the rights to Dune? Like, who was there other studios competing with you for those rights? Did Legendary reach out to you? Did you reach out to them? I'm very curious, like, how this happens.
Yeah, there's other studios that we're competing with it. So Funcom, we own the digital rights to a lot of pretty famous IPs. Like we've been known for Conan. We own the digital rights to Conan the Barbarian. So we've done games like Conan Exiles, Age of Conan. We had Conan Unconquered, which was an RTS game that we worked with Petroglyph on, the old guys from Las Vegas that did Command and Conquer. Those guys, they formed Petroglyph. So they worked with us on Conan Unconquered. We have a new game coming out called Conan Chop Chop, which is a roguelike game, a 4-player roguelike game. So we have a lot of IPs at Funcom that we own. We own Solomon Kane. We own things like Mutant Year Zero, Mutant Chronicles. Like we own the digital rights to those games with Cabinet Entertainment. So we've gotten into the business of understanding what it's like to own an IP, and we kind of talked to Legendary. We knew that they were taking on the Dune franchise, and we said we would love to have the digital rights and work with you on creating the games for that universe. We've been proven on Conan Exiles. Here's what we've done with all these other games, and they saw what we can do, and then we gained the rights to doing the Dune games. So,
and was this when you realized it was starting production a few years ago, or like how does that was it like Denis Villeneuve is making this. And just so everyone knows, he's the director of Blade Runner 2049. So I'm excited for the movie for that reason alone. That was one of my favorite movies of all time.
He's an amazing director, and honestly, the cast that they have on this movie, it blows things out of the water with Oscar Isaac and Jason Momoa and Josh Brolin, Zendaya. I mean, you name it. I mean, it's a star-studded cast. I hate to say this, and I'm a Star Wars fan. I feel like it's going to be kind of like the next Star Wars. And that's a bold statement.
So is that what you said, though? Did someone at Funcom say that when it came out that they were making this movie, and immediately you guys reached out to them and other game studios did, and then they picked you? Is that how that worked then?
Yeah. So we had to pitch. We pitched ourselves to them, but they knew that this was going to be a franchise that's going to have characters and toys and games. It's going to be a universe. It's not just like we're just going to do a movie and that's it. I mean, there's probably going to be multiple movies and you name it, and spin-offs. Let's see how this goes, this first one, but I will tell you, it is an amazing movie. Some people have seen it. So it actually gets released in Norway in September, which is crazy because we don't get to see it here in the U.S. until October 22nd. So they get to see it a month early, which is normally the other way around. Normally the European countries get to see it a month later, but they get to see it next month or within the next couple of days or 2 or 3 weeks, I'd say. So
when you pitched them, you said you secured 3 games, and I think I asked you this when I was there in person in North Carolina. I'm kind of curious how that works with a pitch, because you said the first one's an open world online survival game, and you won't, I don't think you can say what the next ones will be yet, but it sounds like, I think a lot of studios would have just said, we're going to make a trilogy, that's what we're going to do.
Oh, no.
And you came in and it sounds like pitched several types of games, and I can see why they would have given it to you for an online survival game. You did Conan, so it makes it a match.
Yeah. We also are a publisher, so we have great relationships with other development studios. Like we published Mutant Year Zero with the Bearded Ladies, so that was a very popular game that was on Xbox Game Pass. I mean, it was a popular game. We did Moons of Madness. Like we've teamed up with other studios, so they knew that we not only have had experience with IPs, we've worked with other development studios and published games, but we can internally develop games. So it was like the best of all worlds, I would say. Okay, if they decide to, do some publishing projects with Dune, great. And if they decide to do some internally, great. They know how to do that, and they know how to work with IPs, and they know how to keep things kind of standardized and stay within the IP realm and work with us. So it was just a lot of the stars aligned to make this one work properly for us.
Right. And I think this is kind of re-asking some of the things I've said, but I just want to read it to get it out there. Sarcastro writes, and he says, hello, Paxton and Tom. Regarding games for Dune, Frank Herbert provided a wealth of source material and 7 novels for the settings of these games. What sort of research and decision-making occurs between executives and game developers to agree to such a project? What goes into a pitch meeting for securing the rights? Paxton, are you prepared to drink the water of life and face the inevitable subreddit combing through and debating the novels versus the game? But I think I'm curious about that too. Like, did the people at Legendary say, hey, this is where it's set, so we need the first game to take place in the same realm of a timeline? And did you, like, how much research was, I'm sure a lot, but I don't know. I would imagine some studios might have not done as much research as others. Like,
I will tell you, Dune is extremely popular with our executives at Funcom. They knew about the books. They read the books. They were familiar with the IP beforehand. It was a popular IP that most people knew about. Our CEO, Rui, loves the Dune universe and Frank Herbert. So that is something that we already had established, that we understood the IP. A lot of our key people understood it. So we didn't really have to sell that as much. The rest of the studio, there's people with 260 employees, not everybody has read the books or seen the movies, and we had to share that with the rest of the team. But just so you know, we've been in pre-production with this game for about a year and a half now. Mm-hmm. Just so you know, timeline wise, it could be a 3+ year production cycle on this game. We'll see what happens. We're not announcing our release date for it.
Good choice. I think lately too many people announce release dates early.
No. We're not announcing that. And I mean, Funcom has historically reached out to our customers and our gamers and asked them what they want to see. So we've done early accesses and we've done alpha testing and beta testing, and that's the key to game development. And I know that there was a question about that, like
I'll read it. Yeah, QH Freddy writes in and he goes, "Hi guys, I was going to do that next. Actually, I was going to
go ahead, read it off, and I'll talk about this."
He goes, "I feel like many games fall short of their goals, and many series get derailed when they lose track of what makes them engaging and enjoyable to play. And often it seems like neither the devs or the community can really pin down why something went wrong. Do you think there's often a fundamental misunderstanding by both sides as to what systems or gameplay and plot elements actually make a game fun? Or is it that there are flaws in the planning or management goals, ambitions, and how people want to go about achieving those?"
There is absolutely a disconnect. You've seen that in a lot of games that have been released lately, where it's not exactly what the player wants to see. I will tell you, we've realized this at Funcom. We've been around for 28 years. We know that some of the games we've released in the past aren't what everybody wants. Every game studio develops things differently. It may have come from a design director or a creative director that came up with a concept, but you have people that want to change things, that think that they know what's best for the game and the community, that you may have a publisher that's putting pressure on you to do this, and monetize it this way. And you may have a programming team that says, we can't do things that you're asking for, but this is what we can do. So all of a sudden, this game that you had a vision for morphed into something that wasn't necessarily what you planned on because of all these contributing factors. So it changes the way that the game was intended, or even the core of the game may not have been good to begin with. You never know. So I think a lot of studios need to find out what makes a game fun and what people are looking for. That's the key to it. Before investing time, effort, money into this, you need to make sure, is this game fun? Is this something that people will want to play? And then test it. I will tell you, we released at Funcom, we've been working on Conan Exiles now for 3+ years, and we just released the Isle of Sipta. It was a DLC. We did an early access, and we asked the community, what do you think of this? We put together this new map, new enemies, new things to explore. What do you think? They came back to us with some pretty creative and insightful feedback on what we were doing, and we morphed the game, and we changed things, and we ended up releasing it, a couple weeks ago, and it got received a lot better than it did when we initially did the early access. So we listened to what they had to say, we changed, and we gave them what they were looking for. And I think that's the biggest thing, is making sure that you understand what people want and giving them what they're looking for. So
I want to bring this up too, because I think it's a fascinating subject that I don't hear enough people discuss, and it's kind of like, it just feels like half the time you'll see games come out that were riding the coattails of a trend, but that kind of worked, I think, well in the 90s when a game took a year to make. If a game takes 4 years to make and it's based on, like, what was it, all the, Rock Band spinoffs, and it's like, hey, guys, people are done buying guitars to play games, and you're way too late to make this. And Battle Royale is another one. I know that Halo Infinite started as a Battle Royale, and they decided mid-development, no. Same thing with Returnal. That wasn't a Battle Royale, but they were going to make one. And they said the game was mostly done, and they said, we're not going to beat any of these other games that are way bigger than us. So why are we, like
it's too late. It's too late to jump on the bandwagon on that one. So you have to try to make something great early on and be innovative. With Funcom, there's a lot of survival games out there, and we're trying to position ourselves being one of the best survival game development companies. That's what we're going for at Funcom. Persistent online survival games. We've proven that with Conan Exiles. How can we make that better? But we also publish different types of games. But internally, we know survival games, and that's what we want to be making. So we're hoping that this Dune game that we're making is the genre-defining survival game. We're hoping that it's going to be the big one, because I feel like everybody's waiting for like this amazing survival game. There was Valheim, and there was Ark and Rust, and I mean there's some good survival games out there, but there's not one that you're like, that is the one. And we're hoping that we're going to be making the one for this, that people can kind of say, wow, every survival game should have this and these skill trees and this type of ability that you can do. And I mean, we're hoping to be making that.
Well, so I guess I want to kind of discuss, if you have one, an example of where something has gone wrong, because, and it doesn't need to be a whole game, but I'm curious, is there a game you guys started once and you were like, oh, half a year in, you know what, this just isn't going to pan out? Because I've heard of people from studios talk about, like, I know at Insomniac, before they made Ratchet and Clank, they were making like some mystic Amazon Warrior game, and they were just like given the advice, apparently from the producers at Sony, that said, we don't feel like this is going to do well. If you are sure it is, make it. And then they eventually canceled it because they're like, we're not having fun playing it. What are we insisting on making this? Like DLC, anything. Like, is there an example you can give like that?
Oh yeah, man. Honestly, this happens at almost every mid to large studio, that you have something in the works. You may be prototyping something. You may have something in pre-production, and you are trying to find out if it's fun, if it works. This happens all the time. And I will say that we have shelved things, and we've put things for later. I'll give an example. In North Carolina, when I joined about 4 years ago, we were developing a 4-player co-op sci-fi shooter. That's what we were building in North Carolina. It was with one of the IPs that we owned. It was a sci-fi 4-player shooter, very similar to a Left 4 Dead kind of thing, but just a little bit different. We were building that, so we started pre-production, and then we were just starting to get into production. But we were trying to find what made our game different and what made our game fun, and we kept trying different things. And it ended up at the end of the day that we're like, it's just not fun enough, and it just doesn't have that thing that makes it different. And then the Dune thing came along, and we said, okay, we need to shift focus. Let's shelve this game that we had a small team on, shelve it for a little while. We can come back to it, but all hands on deck for Dune. And we've been co-developing this Dune game with all of our different studio locations, and we have 5 locations now in Portugal and Norway and Sweden and Romania. So we have all these locations now working on this one title. We had to shelve that game, so we didn't find the fun in it. We didn't find the fun, as we were calling it, and we've pivoted a few times where we tried to figure that out, but it was shelved. And it
was just like, this is going to be a sci-fi co-op shooter. Once you're playing it, you're like, is this really doing anything that another game hasn't done, was the question.
Right. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, it wasn't different. It wasn't defining. It was like, is this just going to be like the rest of the 4-player co-op shooters? Is it going to be like, there's a fantasy one that we were looking at. I forget the name of it now. But just like a Left 4 Dead, there's just a lot of those 4-player co-op shooters, and we were like, how could we be different? Yeah, it could be in a sci-fi setting. There's not a lot of sci-fi 4-player co-op shooters, but we were trying to just be different, and we weren't finding it. So we shelved that game for a little bit, and that happens at every studio. I mean, we've done that a few times, and our core teams will still work on the money-making games, the Conan Exiles and our live games. Like we still supported Secret World Legends and Age of Conan. We have teams of people working on them, but you have to have a prototyping team that's making the next great thing and trying things out. And a lot of studios will have those type of teams put together and prototyping and pre-producing things and seeing if it works and if it doesn't work. So you can't put all your eggs in one basket. I guess that's the lesson. A lot of studios have gone under.
And some studios have, yeah.
They've gone under. I used to work with a team at Bosky. I helped them out for a little while. Cliff Blazinski's company, great team of people, super talented, core group of senior game developers. They put all their eggs in one basket with the Lawbreakers game like 2 years ago. It was a shooter. It just had a high learning curve. It didn't do very well, and that studio went under. I ended up hiring a lot of people from Bosky because they were local to me in the Raleigh area. But that's just one example of a studio that took all their eggs, put it in the one basket, thought that the game couldn't fail, instead of having a team of people that were prototyping the next thing and trying things out and trying to find out what the next fun thing is. So,
yeah, I'm looking at the Lawbreakers now. It's funny. I don't mean it. I don't remember this game, or I think I might vaguely remember it. And it says it's a hero shooter, and I'm like, oh well, there's competition there if you try to.
Oh, it got released right when Overwatch was like.
Yeah,
at the peak. So it's like, okay, we're competing with Overwatch, and this had a much higher learning curve and a skill curve. So it was like, it took you a while to kind of figure things out. So it was an amazing game, and it was the team that worked on it. Like I said, there are top class people that worked at a lot of different AAA companies that came to make this game. It wasn't the right time for that game. It had a lot of competition. That studio didn't have anything else in the pipeline, so it went under. And I feel horrible, and I love a lot of the guys that worked at that studio, but that's just an example of like, you have to try new things and figure out what works and what doesn't work. So
Odiv Kurtz writes in, I hope I said that right. It's clearly not an English name. He goes, hello, Paxton. Can I ask, what are your thoughts on CDPR's Cyberpunk 2077 fiasco? In my eyes, it is one of the worst cases of a disconnect between marketing people and actual developers. I also want to ask whether, in your opinion, the quality checking of games has truly degraded over the past decade. The last 3 to 4 years, we've had multiple instances where big AAA studios announce their next big titles only for them to be incredibly unpolished on launch, like Cyberpunk, Fallout 76, Anthem, and Mass Effect Andromeda, just to name a few. So I guess there's 2 questions there. Let's start with Cyberpunk.
Yes, there was 100% a disconnect between marketing, the development studio, and when you work on a game for so long, you want to get it out there, and it comes to a point where you're like, we've dumped so much money into this game. Can we push ourselves to get to that finish line? And I think they had every intention on polishing it at the end, and they may have had too many features that they didn't decide to cut, or they may have not spent enough time in QA. Obviously, it takes a lot to polish something once you have a game in place. It takes a big team of quality assurance people, and sometimes it takes time to fix all those bugs that you're finding, and they just didn't give themselves enough time. They talked to marketing, and they had their release date, and they stuck to it, and they didn't give themselves enough time to fix the bugs. That's what happened there. And that game could have been something absolutely amazing. The whole premise and what they were building was amazing. And I love the Witcher games. Like I play the Witcher games, and I think they can make amazing things. It's just with this game, they stuck to their release date and couldn't cross the finish line with the team.
Well, it's interesting because I think you just said, can we get this across the finish line now if we need to? And I think there was a need, because I think if you read between the lines, there were some leaked emails where some people who worked at CDPR were talking to journalists a couple of years ago, and they were like, oh, the game should come out 2022. So this was like a year before they released the game, and they were people working there didn't expect it to be done for another 2 years. I'm under the impression the reason they released it in the state they did, and the reason they insisted on it being on last-gen consoles at launch when they're really more of a PC-centric dev, is that, and they didn't even work on the last-gen consoles, is that they needed the money that the game had been in. I mean, when was that game announced? 2012? That's the only reason they would have released it, because they had to. They needed the money.
That's what I was going to say. They got to the point where they're like, we have to start making money and recoup some of these losses, or else it's not going to go well. So they got pressure to release it when they did. Somebody put the pressure on them saying, if we don't do this, it's not going to be good for our company. So I mean, I don't have any proof of that, but that's what I would imagine happened. I mean, if they were originally talking about 2022 and they released it, a year plus earlier, something happened along the way where they may have put too many resources into it early on, where they had they were in the red, like it must have been huge. So they were like, yeah, we need to be making money or else we're in trouble. So I will tell you the one good thing about not the one good thing. There's a lot of good things, but about Funcom is that we do have live games that make us money. So we are able to work on things because we have games like Conan Exiles and things constantly getting released. So we have multiple streams of revenue at Funcom as opposed to a studio that may just like release one game and then it's gone. Like, so we have games as a service. So a lot of our games have subscriptions or people coming back, or we get new people joining every single day. So it's a little bit different of a model. So as opposed to like, let's say, Witcher or something like that. You release it, people play it. It's not like games as a service, so just a little different. I would imagine they had to recoup their money, is what I would guess.
What do you think about these rising costs for like super AAA games? I mean, there's some companies like Rockstar where I'm like, yeah, I don't doubt them. I'm sure GTA 6 is going to be good. It will be. And you know what? They've made so much money, which you bring that up, actually. They're continuing to make money off of GTA 5 and Red Dead Redemption Online that they don't need to worry. They can take their time. And I feel they're one of the few studios where they've scaled the costs up to, like, let's be honest, GTA 6 is probably going to have a $1 billion budget. I mean, I think it will.
It's crazy.
And it will. I think, I'm not hyperbole. That's my estimate for everyone listening. I think GTA 5.
How many games you have to sell to recoup that cost? Like
100 million? I don't know, because they'll sell it.
It has to be so good. So yeah, but, I know they will. They're the pinnacle AAA studio, so they'll do a great job.
But I don't think most studios can be bet on to do that. And I actually think that Rockstar is one of the few studios where, for the amount of money spent. And again, obviously this verges into opinion here, but for me, Red Dead Redemption 2, it felt like a polished single-player experience, except it wasn't. Like, the amount of detail in the people you would run into and side quests, and it's like, I feel like when you play a Rockstar game, you see where the money is going. They basically just made an open-world game where every mission is like a single-player game in a smaller...
Yeah, it's huge.
But a lot of studios don't accomplish that.
Oh, it's hard. It's a lot of time, effort, money, and some studios can't handle that. Some studios are just like, okay, we have enough money and resources to do X, and Rockstar's like, we can build you A through Z with the amount of money and resources that we have. So they can add more features, they can polish things. They have the team of people and the money to do that. So a lot of studios don't.
Well, so what do you think about, like, for example, at this point, actually, I'd say rising game prices is just keeping up with inflation. But, I mean, a lot of people, I think it's like, we got to make this a $70 or a $60 game, and then they add 10 side missions no one even plays. Like, I keep thinking, and I've heard some executives talk about this at a few studios, like, can we just make a $50 game that's 10 hours long and we didn't spend half of the development time polishing side missions? Like, what do you think about, like, because a lot of these rising costs, I feel like, is everyone trying to be a AAA when maybe AAA's changed. AAA now means $100 million plus budgets. Maybe just make a $40 game,
Yeah. I mean, that's the realm that Funcom is in. Most of our games are $40 games. That's because we understood where we are in the market and what we do. We don't have $60 games at Funcom. So we know what we're producing and we know what we ask for out of our gamers. And we know that if we give you this, Conan Exiles open world survival experience, that if you enjoy yourselves, then, we have all these other DLC packs that you can download if you want it, but if you just want to enjoy the game, it's $40. So yeah, that was what we thought. Everybody monetizes their games differently, and they have to look at what they're offering people and what people would be willing to spend for what they're offering. So they have people that have specific jobs that do that. Monetization directors and managers, that's their job, is to figure that kind of stuff out. And we have one at Funcom, and every studio has one. So.
Gosh, Reese, why does Windows 10 Professional have to be so expensive? Don't listen to that, nerd. Listen to me.
You can get all the great Windows and gaming keys you need at cdkeyoffers.com. That includes Steam, Origin, Uplay, PlayStation, PC, and many other keys, including Windows, Microsoft Word, and Professional. Use the offer code BrokenSilicon for 25% off all of these fancy Windows keys and Dashing for 3% off everything on the website. One more time, that's go to cdkoffers.com. They are a fantastic sponsor of Moore's Law is Dead. Use offer code DASHRINK for 3% off everything on the website and Broken Silicon for 25% off all Windows products. Now, back to the show.
Matthew Landavazo writes in, and he says, "Hi, Tom and Paxton. What are your thoughts on the early access funding model? On one hand, I find it better than pre-ordering to help out a developer, and it provides a lot of playtesting, which seems hard to beat. On the other hand, I like being surprised by a game and its mechanics, and early access kind of takes the mystery of a game away. Early access seems like a safe bet financially, and from the same point that the internet at large can be overly critical of everything. This way they know exactly what they are getting because they helped build it. Thanks again for the great content." I mean, frankly, I would want to jump in and just say, I think early access, not all of them are the same. Like, I just played Mountain Blade. I still play Mountain Blade Bannerlord a ton. And it's like, I'm going to be honest, that game at early access felt more finished than a lot of quote unquote finished games.
Right. So you had a good experience with that one then. And it depends on where your game's at. And like I mentioned this earlier in the podcast that we do early access for our games. We did it with the Isle of Sipta. It worked really well, but the guy who gave that question, he's right. Like, if you do early access, it loses the fun and the excitement of like getting a game when it releases. And the excitement then comes into, okay, all this feedback that I gave, did they make the changes? How much better is this going to be, this experience? What's new in it? So it's just a different way of looking at it. But we, as developers, we would rather give something in early access so that we can make it the best that it can be for the widest group, the broadest audience, I would say. So, yeah. I like early access.
Yeah, I mean, because it kind of gets a bad name. I don't know. When I look at a game on Steam and it says early access, it's funny. I just go, oh, probably don't want to get that. But I guess if it's a studio I trust, it's like, oh, I have no worries. I'm just getting it for less money sooner than everyone else.
It also just depends on the genre of the game. Like, if you do an early access, like story-driven, single-player game, it's, that it's going to kind of be ruined for you. But if you're doing some kind of like what we're building is a open-world survival game where it's like, okay, maybe they'll add on different stuff later on when they fully release it. But like, what does this environment look like? It's a little bit different. Like, you're not really spoiling too much of it. It depends on the game. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Kickstarter games? Like, for example, I know we have a question here asking about what you think of it, the fact that, like, and I looked it up before we started. There'll be a link in the description. Star Citizen supposedly been in development for a decade. Like, what do you think about games that take the money up front in that way without providing anything?
I've had no experience with Kickstarter games. I've bought plenty of tabletop RPGs that have been Kickstarters, and we've had them in our studio. But when it comes to video games, you got to really trust what the person is. Like, you don't know who's making these games for the most part. They could be promising different things. I've seen so many scam Kickstarters for games that people promise the world and they can't deliver on that. So you have to look into who's making these games and what they're willing to do, and it's just an interesting model, like the whole Kickstarter world. I personally have never had experience. Funcom doesn't do it. None of the studios that I've ever worked for have done the Kickstarter model. I think it's more for like the smaller indie studios, or for a few people that have had a really good idea that are trying to fund it, that can't necessarily get any large funding. That's a good option for them to try to get their vision out there to the public. So it's just you as a consumer. Do you want to roll the dice and see if it actually gets produced?
Isn't it annoying though for someone like you, where you sell something to someone and it's like, I hope this is successful, and then you see some Kickstarter games where it's like they didn't even have to make anything. You just gave them all this money. Is that ever frustrating though?
It is, because they got paid to work on that game, as opposed to us, who are kind of like using our funds from other games to fund our new stuff, and we hope that it does well. It's all about the bets that you're willing to place on things. Like, are we willing to put our money behind this idea in this game? And if we are, then we'll put it out there. And these people, yeah, it is a little frustrating, I guess, that they've gotten funding for an idea and it's never been proven. Like they haven't been proven as developers, or maybe they have. I don't know. It depends on the situation. But yes, it can be frustrating.
So I do want to touch on another thing that I think is really important to bring up now that I have you here. I mean, just the relationship between publishers and developers, because I'm not even sure how to ask this question, but it's something that's frustrated me. Is it always seems like, so EA was voted like worst company on earth or something for a few years in a row. And I'm like, I'm not saying I like EA, but does any responsibility come to developers ever, you guys? I mean, like when a game goes wrong, how much of that is like often the publisher pushing them, and how much of that is that it was the developer's job to raise their hand and say, this is going wrong? I mean, I'm wondering what you think about that relationship, like EA.
Sometimes your hands are tied, man, as a developer. So we are a developer and publisher, right. And we have had EA as a publisher for Funcom. So they were they published The Secret World for us. I don't know, 10 plus years ago. I wasn't part of Funcom then. It was a difficult relationship. So a lot of times developers' hands are tied and they are at the whim of the one that holds the purse. Mm-hmm. It's one of those type of things. So if a publisher wants to see something or is pushing hard on something, sometimes the developers have to do it. I will tell you, we are a publisher, like I mentioned, and we have a very good relationship with our developers. We treat it more like a partnership where we oversee everything, but if things need to be changed, I mean, we have had to move release dates and we've had to change features and we've tweaked our games because we've realized that the development studio wasn't able to do something or wasn't able to deliver. And we're not the type of studio that would just pull funding out from somebody if they weren't able to hit a certain milestone. It depends on the relationship between the publisher and the developer. And some of them are really tough. Like I feel really bad, but there was a studio in Florida called Dark Side Games that I used to work for. I know the owner very well. So I was helping him grow his studio, and he got funding from Microsoft. They were the publisher, and he was going to be doing a game with them. He had a 70-person team, and he was halfway done with his game. Halfway through, they just pulled the funding, saying we're going in a different direction, and he had to let his entire studio go. He put all his eggs in one basket for that. He did not have a good relationship with that publisher where they were willing to change things and listen to him and work with him on timelines or deliverables. So it depends on your relationship with that publisher. So we try to have great relationships with all of our developers. And right now we're working with 3 or 4 developers on some publishing projects. And we had such a good relationship with our team in Sweden, the Outsiders, who are developing a game for us called Metal Hellsinger, which is a rhythm-based shooter, that we purchased the studio 2-3 months ago. So they are now our location in Sweden. But we had such an awesome relationship with them that it worked so well that we're like, we just want you as part of our company. Or would you be willing to be part of Funcom? And they were like, absolutely. So it just depends on that relationship. So we try to have good, lasting relationships, and we try not to push our developers and create crunch cultures and do you don't want to do that to a team and a group. So,
but it's also like, right, when EA, for example, has Mass Effect Andromeda come out, and it's not. I think this is not controversial for me to say it's not as good. It did not live up to the hype, is what people were expecting. Yeah. Let's put it that way. Like, it doesn't behoove EA, though, to like just close studios and cancel projects. So, like, why do you think that happens? And isn't there sometimes, though, isn't there, I don't want to say good, but like, at what point do you just go, hey, you've been working on a game for 5 years, it's canceled, man. Like, our job is to pull the plug. You know, obviously that example in Florida was bad, but.
Yeah. I mean, they look at it from a business standpoint of how much money they're dumping into something and their return on investment. That's what they're looking at. So they have different criteria than we'd have as a smaller publisher. So they're looking at, they have a financial team that's saying, hey, we've hit that point right now. If we keep going, we're not going to be able to get a return on investment here. So they're not as flexible as some other publishers are, is what I would say. So like I said, if you're looking for a publisher, find one that has a better relationship than some of these bigger ones that would have a better relationship with you. So, but yeah, somebody like you mentioned, somebody at EA said, we need to pull the plug on this project because it's not going to make us money.
Yeah.
So,
And they probably, now that I'm thinking about it, did the math where they're like, not only is it not going to make its money back, but if we think this won't be done in a year, then we'll lose more money not recuperating half of the cost than we will keeping it going. I'm sure someone
some
did that.
financial teams looking at those numbers, absolutely.
I do want to ask you about this because this has been kind of, at least in some of the circles I follow for like gaming news online. I heard you guys are owned by Tencent. Is there any concern about, it seems like you work very autonomously, right? And I mean, like I called you and you're like, hey, I'll come on tomorrow or something. Like there's a lot of freedom, it seems, at Funcom, but like I looked it up. I wanted to make sure I got this right. There was a recent DreamWorks movie where they just put like the South China Sea dotted line in the background of a map. And, Vietnam, Korea, a lot of countries were like, not cool. We're pulling this movie. But China told DreamWorks, you have to put this South China Sea map in the background of a scene in an animated movie. And I've been thinking to myself more and more, like a game I want to see is an open world game in the Chinese warlord period, the early 1900s. It was the Wild West, but they were using bootleg Thompsons and World War I weapons. There were warlords and republics all over China. There's the looming threat of the Japanese invading, and they did eventually. It's a fast, and then you had communists versus nationalists. What a fast, it's almost like the Spanish Civil War, but what if it was the Wild West in China with Thompsons? I just like, why has
cool,
no one, and it was real. Why has nobody made this game? And it occurred to me, half of the studios probably wouldn't be allowed to because then you'd have to acknowledge Chiang Kai-shek went to Taiwan or, that type of stuff.
I don't know what pressures would be put on you to do that, but that sounds like a fun game to me. But I will tell you, it's been wonderful working with Tencent. They own a lot of different companies. They own part of Epic Games and Riot and Supercell, Miniclip. I mean, Shark Mob. They have a lot of studios under their umbrella, and they trust the fact that we know what we're doing. We've been a proven studio for 28 years. They were, just so you know, the background of Tencent and Funcom. They were on our board for a year or so. They owned about 29% of our company while we were making Conan Exiles and these things. And they saw what we were doing with Dune, and they saw what we were going to be working on, and they thought to themselves, we think they're making the next genre-defining survival game. We would like to buy the company. So they outright purchased Funcom. And we are a 100% Tencent company, but they trust the fact that we know what we're doing, and they are very hands-off. I mean, they'll be part of our reviews, and they see what we're working on, obviously, because they pay the bills at times. But no, most of the time it's their company. But they're very hands-off. Like, they don't change management. They don't tell us who to hire, who to fire. They just kind of look over our games, tell us what they like, and they try to give us support whenever we need support. So if ever we need, analytics or monetization help, they'll say, hey, we've got these resources over here, we'll help you out. So we have a good relationship with Tencent. They've never been
and I mean, like,
hostile.
if I may, the games you're working on are unlikely to be controversial.
Correct.
Let's just be honest.
Yes.
But
yeah,
I mean, like,
true.
I'm trying to think of a scenario in my head where it could pop up, though. But like, what, like, I want to make sure I ask it in the right way, because I don't intend gotcha questions or like unfair questions, but it's like, is there, let's say something came down the pipe and it's like, hey, we want to make sure this message is in the game because of this, or we don't like that this is, there are some games funded by, owned by Chinese companies where perhaps they're not censoring it directly, but like online, you can't type the word Hong Kong. Like, would you push back if they told you, hey, by the way, people aren't allowed to say Tiananmen or something like that?
I don't know if we'd ever be in that situation. We haven't been in that situation yet, so I don't know how our C-level would address something like that. I feel lucky because most of the games that we're producing are within a universe that is controlled. Like, you're not going to deal with China when you're doing a Dune game, or like, it's just,
but someone could type online, right? Someone could type Tiananmen. If they told you you've got to censor the word Tiananmen, do you think there'd be pushback within Funcom, or would be
a discussion? Like, we talk about, like, why are we doing that? Like, I know that there would be a bigger discussion and we'd have to talk it out. I'm not saying that we bend the knee, or I'm not saying that we would, it would be a discussion with their team and figure out why they're asking us to do that. They haven't prior to this. So
Yeah.
what's going on that they're asking us to do it now? What's going on? So, that's not something I'm involved
I
in,
know.
just so you know. That's a C-level, like our CEO would be dealing with those type of issues if it ever came down to it. So, I can't speak for how Funcom would deal with that. So, sorry, man.
No, I know, but I did. This was a unique opportunity to ask a question like that. Let me move.
Yeah, I get it.
Let me move on to another one. Then Brad Medlin writes in. He says, "Hey there, Tom, and distinguished guest. A few questions. How are game developers using reality capture to better design levels and landscapes of the game? Also, what technologies are making this easier to use? Do studios use third parties to help make the environments? What are the technologies you see making the biggest difference in game development? Is it CPUs like Threadripper, or is it the things used to capture the stuff that's rendered?"
I'll tell you, we got an amazing motion capture and rendering platform recently. It's called Xsense, the letter X and then SENS. It is typically when you do motion capture or environment capture, you have a trellis with cameras and you have people, standing in there and capturing it. That now we have a suit that you put on that captures it all within the suit. You don't need cameras. It just...
Oh, right. Kind of like new VR devices too, where they just put the camera on there. Yeah.
Yep. So it is just a suit that you wear, and it puts all your surroundings and your environment and yourself in the game. I took my team in North Carolina. Just so you know, in North Carolina, we're doing the combat in the Dune game. That's what our team in North Carolina is responsible for, combat and animations. My animation director came from Infinity Ward. He's an amazing guy. Oh. He worked on all the Call of Duties. Now
I've heard of Infinity Ward.
Yeah. So he's now our animation director, and he found these Xsense suits, and we actually took our animation team to a gun range here in the Raleigh area where we're based out of, and we had our suits on, and we shot all these different types of weapons, and we took all the movements from shooting these weapons, and we're putting them into the Dune game as you fire, a smuggler rifle or something funny. It was taken from this Xsense suit that we had, but it wasn't done through the traditional motion capture camera rigging system. It's just new technology that allowed us to just go anywhere, film something, and it's now going to be in the game. It made it 1,000 times easier. So that's new, cool technology. We do have environment artists though that we use the Unreal Engine at Funcom, so they're utilizing the plugins and the newest, latest, greatest offerings of the Unreal Engine for our environments, and they develop things. So we have a team of environment artists that actually create assets and environments. So yeah.
Okay, and that's interesting too, because I think you take it for granted if you're playing a shooter, but it's like in real life, a gun makes your shoulder. We talked about it earlier. A rigger will need to know how the recoil of a gun moves the shoulder of the skeleton, but then your leg actually also moves at the same time a little bit. Having a suit just with cameras all over it, you can just capture all that right there firing a gun.
Yep. Yeah, so it was really helpful having a suit that took the recoil. That we shot so many different calibers of guns, big calibers, small calibers, and just how your body shakes and what happens. And it's going to make the game feel more realistic. So it was just new technology that we were able to use, and it wasn't nearly as expensive as buying a whole trellis and camera system. So it was a fraction of the price, but it was new technology. We were willing to use it, and it's awesome. And we could ship suits to all of our locations. So if our team in Portugal wants to have a suit, they could just record something out, rolling around outside of their office, and we could use that in the game. So it just makes it a lot easier to put, cool things and assets into the game with new technology.
Okay, let me ask a few questions about getting into the gaming industry, because you gave a presentation at CGS about this, and I mean, I'm not looking for a job right now, but I thought the advice you gave was fascinating. You heat mapped resumes based on eyes, what people actually look at when they're reading a resume. So it's really in-depth stuff. Just in general, what is the best avenue to get into either programming or creative directing and gaming? Because I'm assuming these are just entirely different career paths that you probably want to focus on two different things. And I think a lot of people, and I noticed this at CGS because there were several presentations about it there, a lot of people just get into QA and think that's how you get in. And I'm not so sure I haven't heard that work out for that many people, to be honest. I mean, what should people do if they want to make games?
People need to find what they're passionate about. If you're passionate about programming, you need to focus on programming. And going into a QA role, if you want to be a programmer, isn't the best avenue. You're right. Typically, our QA team members will get industry experience. Sometimes they'll transition onto like a production role, like they'll become a production coordinator or an associate producer or producer, something like that. That's kind of the trajectory of QA. I have put together an apprenticeship program at our studio where I tried to get people in customer service or QA that had skills other than quality assurance into other roles. So I'll give an example. I did have somebody from QA that showed skills in 3D art and he knew how to model. I helped him transition to a 3D artist role, and then now he's my technical artist because he came from a background where he knew the Unreal Engine and knew some scripting. So I helped him transition out of that. But that's a unique case, I will say that. So most people, they need to figure out, do I want to be a coder? If they do, they should just learn the language of the engines that they'd want to work in. So if you know that you want to be making mobile games, if you love mobile games, you need to know Unity is probably the best engine for mobile games.
Mm-hmm.
And what does Unity use? It uses C#. So I should probably learn some C#, coding and these engines are free to download now. You could download Unity, you could download the Unreal Engine and just play with it. It's free. So I tell people, you can go to school for programming. That's great. I've hired people without degrees because they're competent programmers, but they love programming and they know what they're doing. So focus on the languages of the engines that studios are looking for. If you're like, oh, I do JavaScript. It's like, well, not a lot of studios will use JavaScript. But
what about Minecraft? That was written in Java, so why can't I make another?
That's an isolated situation. Most studios will use a C-based language with their engine. But going back to your original question about like a creative director, you don't just go into the industry becoming a creative director. You start by becoming like a game designer or a level designer or a systems designer, just so you understand what it takes to make a game and how to make systems and how to make a level or how to design features in a game. And from there, you can then grow on that skill set and learn other things and then become a creative director. But there are degrees out there for game design. I know that studios like universities like Full Sail and Ringling, and there, even here in Raleigh, North Carolina, there's a community college called Wake Tech that I'm partnered with, and I love the people over there. They have a game design and simulation associate's degree that they offer, and they will teach people the fundamentals of game design or programming. They'll let them touch on the surface, and they have to make a game at the end of the class. And there are programs out there that will help you learn game design and game development if you don't know where to go. You just need to find the right university or college. Or you could do it yourself. Like I said, download an engine, play around with it. I once was talking with the founder of id, and he did Doom, and he was like, people asked him, how did you become a game developer and how did you make your own company? He said, I just did it. I found the time to download what I needed to. I learned the languages and I made myself a company. I just did it. Like, some people are afraid to just take that step and try things out. So if you want to get into gaming, find what you're passionate about, find an avenue to take that passion, whether it's design, programming, art, and then be the best you can be. I tell everybody that, like, just be the best, because it's an extremely competitive industry, and we only look for the best when we're hiring at all these studios. And I've hired for a lot of different studios over the years, and we look for the best of the best. So if you're a mediocre artist or programmer or designer, you're probably not going to get a job. That's the reality of it. You have to be the best.
Well, it's interesting. So, you say that, to summarize, it sounds like you're saying just do it, but make sure you're actually doing it, Yeah. Because I think a lot of people, I was talking about this in the Moore's Law's Dead community the other day, like, just, there's all these ads, like, Steve Jobs dropped out of college. Most people who drop out of college don't actually become CEOs. Right. Like, I don't know that that's good advice. But at the same time, someone I talked to at CGS, who's an indie developer, said they use Unity. So it's funny that you mentioned that for that type of development as well. And at Sony Santa Monica, he said, honestly, I became a VFX artist when I just started making good gun packs as DLC for like free DLC, free downloads. And I went to college for it, but my friend just started making gun packs before me, and he got the job at Sony before me. Like, so it does seem like, I'm just, obviously you would know, anyone can look at your LinkedIn and see your experience, but it is funny. Like, I literally know personal examples of multiple people I've talked to recently. Everything you just said is what made it work out for them. Just actually making it,
doing it. Yeah. Just do it. Yeah. Like I've hired people that have degrees, and I've hired lots of people that don't have degrees. The difference is that all these people just knew what they were doing. They were passionate about it. They understood it. And you have to find out how you obtain that knowledge, whether it's doing it yourself in the basement of your mom's house, ripping apart the Unreal Engine and figuring out how to use blueprints because you want to be some awesome systems designer. That's on you. Or if you have the opportunity to go to a university that will teach you how to do it, great, do that as well. But you have to do it. So it doesn't matter as long as you figure out what to do and how to do it. Like, take the step. If you're passionate about it, follow your dreams and do it.
Let me ask you this. What is the biggest misconception you think the general public has when it comes to game development? I know it's a big question, but it's when I asked one dev this, and he's like, devs aren't lazy was his thing. You just see it all over Reddit, anytime something goes wrong, everyone just says it's because they were lazy. Like, that was one answer I've gotten, but like, just in general, and like managing studios, how studios operate, making games, what big misconceptions do you think are out there that you think should be corrected first?
It's not easy to make games, man. It's not. People think, oh, I've got this creative idea I can make. I think we should make a fighting game that does this, and it's not easy to make a game. It takes so many different resources to make a game. It takes time, effort, money, technology. There are so many people that go into making any game. And you need to make sure that you have the right art direction, the right creative direction, the right programming team on board. I mean, we try to find the best people that work well together. I mean, it takes the right company culture so that people can work well together to make that game. So I will say it is not easy to make a game. So when people critique games and they say, oh, that was crap, like, they really don't know what went into making a game. And it may not be the best game, but it is difficult to make a game. So just realize that there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of factors that go into it. There may be external pressures. You may have a publisher or something that says, ship this, and you may say, we're not ready, and you have to ship it.
But from the publisher's perspective, maybe they're like, you've been working on this 5 years, man.
Yeah,
like, what's going on?
Yeah. Yep, that's true, and that happens sometimes. So they're like, "We're done," and then that's on the developer's hands that they did not do things in a timely manner. A lot of times, it comes down to proper planning on things. I will say that we utilize something at Funcom called Scrum. It's a production methodology. It's like Agile or Waterfall. I don't know if you've ever heard of those terms, but we use Scrum. So we try to effectively plan what we're going to be doing, and then we review that every 2 weeks, and then we plan for the next 2 weeks, and then we review it. We have a big plan of what we're doing over the course of the game, but we break it down by 2-week sprints. So if a studio is not properly planning, they're going to end up in a crunch culture, or they're going to overscope something, and they're going to have to cut things. So it's all about proper planning and making sure that you stay on top of your team without creating a hostile environment where people are having to work crazy overtime. And that's one thing that I love about Funcom, is that we're a Norwegian-based company, and we have Scandinavian values, and we have a great work-life balance, and we do not have a crunch culture. Everybody works like 40 hours a week, and even if you were to work on a Saturday for some random reason, we give you that back as comp time. So it is it's an amazing environment. And it's very different from a normal studio that has that kind of crunch culture. And I do think a lot of that attributes to poor planning. Mm-hmm. So I will say that.
Yeah, because I mean, like, I have two feelings about it, right? On the one hand, this is industry of passion. This is like, dude, people are going to play this, and also I like it. So because I like it, I want to make sure it's perfect because I like it. I want what I like to be perfect. So I think people are going to throw themselves into working long hours, probably without being asked to half the time. I think that's unavoidable to a certain extent if you care about something. Like, I'm someone who makes podcasts, videos. I can assure people that there are days I work 12 hours because I want that video to be perfect. No one made me do it. But at the same time, if it's constant crunch, you would go, well, so if it's constant, that means it's predictable. What are you doing wrong with planning, though, right?
They are probably planning on the fact that their team is crunching. When at Funcom, there are people absolutely that will put in extra hours. I mean, I do it myself because I love the company and I love what I'm doing. But you don't want to have the culture where you expect that out of people and you're saying, no, you can't go home and have dinner with your family because we have planned for you to be here for these long hours. Like, you don't want to be part of a culture that will do that to you. It's like one of those nice things where it's like, wow, you're here and you. Like, I absolutely recognize when people work above and beyond and people get, increased pay if they do that kind of stuff. But like, it shouldn't be expected upon people. I think that's the difference. As a production team member, you should not plan on your studio constantly crunching and destroying people's work-life balance. So, yeah.
All right. For fun, I got kind of like a final question here then.
Sure.
This usually is mostly about gaming hardware. Of course, with you, I wanted to ask questions I couldn't ask, the typical like person at AMD or Intel designing chips. But you have to admit, you've been following gaming. You must have noticed in the past few years and going into next year, technology is getting way better, faster again. Like, I feel like there was some stagnation about 10 years ago, and like everything was just a quad core for 10 years, let's be honest. And now we just have 16 cores. Intel's about to release a 16 core to desktop. They're going to release a 24 core next year. AMD is bringing out, I mean, technically, if you count Threadripper, AMD, you can buy a 64 core processor.
Crazy, man.
Like, and the latest graphics cards are very powerful. And as far as like can communicate based on talking to people at NVIDIA and AMD, next year, they're going to double performance again, as far as I can tell. They're just going to double it again. And I mean, now SSDs, not just SSDs, but next gen SSDs are standard in consoles. Like, what do you make of like the creativity that you can do with this extra performance? Like, what are you expecting to be done with doubling performance again next year? And is there this feeling when you talk to people like actually working on the games that like, oh, we can do more because of how quickly things are innovating again?
Absolutely. But I'm guessing that's where your podcast came from. Moore's Law is dead. The whole doubling every 2 years, right?
Yeah, because it certainly didn't for like 20 years.
Right. So I get it. So that it makes sense. So, but at Funcom, I mean, increased technology will allow us to render things faster. I will tell you, most of the hard drives we're putting in our systems are all SSDs now. We buy like four terabyte SSD cards. I mean, we have to if we're building these big games. So it's like, the better hardware that we have, the faster that we're going to be able to render, the faster that we're going to be able to put things in place, the faster that our games are going to be produced. So as long as we don't add on more features and stuff, but like, technology helps us. It doesn't hurt us. So the more that's why I say we're trying to get the latest and greatest GPUs. We're trying to get as many, SSDs as we can in all of our systems so that things run faster, things run smoother. Like, that's what we're trying to get. It's just hard to get that type of stuff now with the environment right now and through retail sources. So, but technology is here to help us, and we're going to use it the best we can to make our games better and build them faster and do cooler things.
So is it less about graphics and more about just being able to make a game more efficiently and quicker? Because I know solid state drives alone have finally removing hard drives and how you had to manage data, I'm sure made all that quicker.
It does. It's so much easier having SSDs and everything, and it makes accessing that information so much faster and allows us to do things like, I know my animators when they're using Maya or Max, they're like, oh my gosh, it's so much easier having things quickly available to me on the SSD as opposed to like the old school, hard drives that is like, okay, I'm waiting forever to bring something over or to render something. So it helps out with technology and it's helping us make better games.
Okay. Like, what do you expect out of ray tracing? Is the Dune game going to have ray tracing? Like, because I think ray tracing is kind of a mixed bag in terms of like, is it really going to become the standard as quickly as people think? I don't know if you can speak to like that.
No. We haven't really talked about what we're doing in the game with Dune yet, just because. Yeah, we don't know what we're doing with ray tracing. It's a topic of discussion. We have been looking at it. We're trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. I know everybody does things differently, but we're trying to figure out if it works for our performance and our game. So we're not announcing that one yet.
But it sounds like it's not as simple as, oh, it's here, let's just put ray tracing in.
No. It's not a flip a switch. No, it affects everything. It affects lighting. It affects the decals, the assets that we create. I mean, it affects everything. It's not a simple flip of a switch. So we need to decide, will this increase performance, decrease performance? What does it do for the look of the game? So there's a lot of factors that are involved. And what does it mean for our programming team? What do we have to do differently? So we're taking that into consideration, but
it's not as simple as let's just use it, because it's interesting. I was talking, or there's an interview with the Demon Souls devs for the new PS5 remake.
Yeah. And
they were like, we considered ray tracing, but we thought that our existing lighting system looked better and didn't crush performance. And I honestly think the latest Demon Souls is some of the best lighting I've seen in a game. It's absolutely mesmerizing, and it doesn't have ray tracing,
Right. Yep. It depends on what your team can do, what you already have, and are you willing to tweak things to make it work. So yeah.
All right, well,
but we'll announce what we're doing. So we have some really unique things that we're building in this game that's very different, but it's a pretty amazing game, this Dune game that we're building. I can't wait for people to see it, and hopefully in the next couple months we're gonna do some kind of trailer. That's the plan.
Well, yeah, let me say this too. I think you can tell how good something's going to be. Half of it's just what's the enthusiasm on the employees you're talking to. Like, especially when I leak stuff about hardware, it's like, I don't know. The people at AMD seem really sure this new graphics card's going to be good. They just can't stop smiling. So, and the enthusiasm I see out of you for Dune, at least this,
it's exciting, man.
Yeah.
We're building a world-class team. I mean, a lot of our team members came from other AAA studios, or some of them have been part of Funcom for a while, but people that understand how to make great games. Like I mentioned, our animation director came from Infinity Ward, and my lead designer who was on America's Army he worked on Fallout 76 over in Maryland. So, I mean, the world-class developers are now part of this project. So a lot of people from Ubisoft have been working on this game. So it's amazing what we're building, and I cannot wait for the world to see it. So,
all right. Well, I know you have a meeting. You're a very busy person, and you were generous enough to meet with me on pretty short notice for this. But I mean, I hope everyone who listened to this enjoyed it. I mean, I think this was at least a pretty unique conversation for gaming circles. And I mean, I want to thank everyone for listening, and I'll let you. You mentioned it a few times, but what do you want to plug?
What do I want to plug? Funcom, if you want to get into game development, we are an amazing game development studio that focuses on work-life balance and a great culture, and we have some amazing projects with Dune and Conan and some stuff in the works right now. So if you're thinking about getting into game development, you could always link in with me. I always accept link-in requests, so feel free to do that if you see my name on LinkedIn, and connect with me. And if you ever wanted to get into gaming or have any questions, you could reach out to me.
Yeah, there will be a link in the description for people who want to do that. All right. Again, thank you for coming on, and thanks to everyone for listening.
All right, thanks.
This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, I don't do this alone. Moore's Law is Dead is a team, with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother, Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, and special assistance by Carbon Cry. Find all of our information, including the information of sponsors you can support, at www.mooreslawsdead.com. If you would like to send fan mail or hardware to us, please mail parcels to Moore's Law is Dead at P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee, zip code 37206. And speaking of fans, patrons are what makes Moore's Law is Dead content possible. The aging business model of spamming ads all over the content is dying. The future of media will be built on fans paying for the content they actually want to exist. And so if you have the extra money, but only if you do, please consider supporting us. For just $2 a month, you get access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to have your questions read aloud on Broken Silicon, Die Shrink, and Loose Ends, and of course, access to the Moore's Law is Dead Discord full of like-minded people who would love to meet you and talk to you about computer hardware. I am one of them. Additionally, higher tiers get access to ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the entire back catalog of Flyover States podcasts and other projects Moore's Law is Dead has done, and thanks in the credits of videos and other perks as well. And hey, if you can't afford to support us, please do share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family on social media, Reddit, and forums. And give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or your preferred podcast app. All of this really does help so much. And if you'd like to advertise on the podcast, hire Tom for consulting, or are a person of interest who would like to be a guest, please reach out to the email address mlhbdead@gmail.com. But as I said, this podcast would not be possible without its patrons supporting it, and so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher producer levels: Brad Medlin, Telos GUK, Benny Berlin, Justin Yacht, Thomas Rupp, I Love You, Lynn and Jim, Ivan K, Tom Bailey, Muhammad Al-Kawari, Frederick Lau, Metrocore, Justin Pear, Zachary Martin, Terrence Heron, Drita Full, Phil S, D31337 Antics, The Ninth Dude, Greg Runegard, Josh Law, JBG, Travis Gooding, The Mechanical Philosopher, Lebo King Kilo, Fatboy Disaru, Daniel Hyde, A Guy in PA81, Nathan Mose, Co-Addict, Matt Salem, Aaron Close, Juan Garcia, Matthew Landavazo, My Name is Nobody, Judson N, Alethros, Jensen Wang, Hey There's a Kitty, Greg T. Wanchuk, Ivan 214, John Jameson, Benjamin Cannon, Matthew Lane, Mark Raidmaker, John Ronner, Chris Licata, Michael McGee, Ali Robertson, Eric Jackson, Jonathan, Patrick Groh, Evan Dingle, Dominique Cox, Stefan, Original Ross, Anthony Gareffa, Joaquin Hagen, Total Silo, Sol Connor, Michael Costa, Andrew S. Blake, Aaron Keith, Gregory S. Acker, Endless Loggins, Tom Sanfilippo, Justice Brennan, Zootsu Taylor, Trevor Powerstew, Alenyan, Nan, Daniel Nishbal, Franco Frederic, Dan Galanowski, Alex Carasteel, Dark Rain 2049, Leighton Perry, Joseph Kierman, Brett Summers, Jed Y, Donovan Russell, Noah Nicolella, Zlicki, Maton Porshegi, David Cowden, Ricky Tan, Ulan, Patrick J.S., Justin Staples, Freddie Canos Jr., Stefan Coates, Kiwi Phil, Dehuhu, Sarah Light, Mitchell Pell, Brett Summers, Eddie Del Castillo, Josie Floria, Luis Correa, Deke, Cheesy Ramen, Tyler Lindley, Tim Robbins, Jake Dude 23, Brian Ringelman, Justin Gower, Caillou Markelli, Dave McCoy, Valco Malev, Gabe Langner, Rodney Kulik, Souza, Michael Deaton, MJB1, Maurice Courtois, Wesley Sager, Scott F. Schneider, Mai Sharona, Y. True, Roman, William W. Draper, Air Rats, Wakir Kant, Henry Zhang, Stephen Hart, Christopher A. Butler, Greg, Peter Moore, Amiable Chief, Justin Thomas, Sam Miller, Semi Lalas, Kevin Chen, Shakir, Nick Rakin, Holden Mobley, Matthew Lazier, R. Pete Sharma, Meat and Pork, Jimmy N.G., Mads, Gordon Freeman, Benjamin Oshley, Jijits, Shield TV Kuto, Aaron, John Wissink, Sam Bensel, Mark Mitchell, Bircho, Jeremy So, James Anderson, Jesse, Jaskowiak, Ian Clifford, and of course, thank you to Sahara for the music.